Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Hello, everybody.
Hi, how are
I'm,
you?
I'm good. I'm Portia Sabin. I'm the president of the Music Business Association, and this is the Royalty Music Maze panel. I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves. Christine Barnum, you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm Christine Barnum. I'm Chief Product Officer at CD Baby. I've been at CD Baby for almost 15 years now. I've got a background in royalties, auditing, and finance, and happy to talk about the royalty maze.
Yay. And Christina?
Thank you. I'm Christina Urich. I'm an Enterprise Business Development Director at Payoneer. I specialize in music and digital partnerships. I've been with Payoneer about 3 years and have a background in financial technology, and excited to be part of this session.
Awesome. Well, let's get started by just talking a little bit about how things have progressed in the music industry. I won't say changed because we don't always have to go back 20 years to when I was first in the business, back in the dark ages. But, you know, how things have progressed in the last few years, because even since streaming became a reality in our world, things have progressed like crazy. And I think, we were talking at one point about the number of lines of data that an Excel spreadsheet can hold. And I think it maxes out at like 1 million. And I remember the first time my Excel spreadsheet maxed out when I was trying to look at my digital royalty income. And that was a scary, scary day. Christine, I know you deal with numbers of lines of data like this all the time. So how do you handle it?
It's challenging for sure. And go back to the dark ages. Funny story, doing royalty audits 20 years ago, I had so many paper royalty statements on my desk that I discovered a mouse had taken a photo on my desk behind all the stacks. So I'm very grateful to have digital files these days. There are no mice looking in them any longer. But it's a challenge, a monthly report from one DSP could be, 10, 12 gigs of data minimum. And it's like, how do you consume that? And then just like get your arms around it. And for a distributor like CD Baby, where we have, hundreds of thousands of active users, making sure that that data maps to the right account owner, to the right title, to the right song. It's challenging. It requires, I will say, creative problem solving, figuring out, Googling large text editors and figuring out how I can still filter and look at the data without, being a SQL expert. So it's a challenge. I'd like to say pretty darn good at it. And then the flip side of that, it's like, great, we've got all this data, which is awesome. And we know where our listeners are and what they're listening to. How do we pay people? And so that's the next challenge.
Right. And that's, at the end of the day, I feel like that's why we all here. It's like, we're all here to make sure that artists get paid, because since the world changed, technology changed without any of us having any say in it. It just happened.
Right.
And if this is the way that artists now can make money, we have a responsibility to make sure that they get that money. And, when I ran a label for 13 years, I did the royalties myself that whole time, partially because I'm stubborn. And I was like, well, should I pay somebody else to do it? I can figure this out. But then after towards the ends of the 13 years, I was like, whoa, this is it's just a massive, it's a massive job. And it turned, it went from being something that was handleable to something that wasn't really. We needed a solution. We needed help with it because of the difficulty and the challenge of accuracy, and making sure that especially when we're talking about tiny numbers, like we're talking about tiny amounts of money in massive quantities.
Yeah. Right. And they need to be accurate, and you need to pay the right amount because these artists rely on that money to be paid to them. So it's important. You have to get it right.
Exactly. And so, what would you say, Christine, what are the sort of major challenges right now with the process of just getting royalties organized and paid out?
I'd say that there's probably two main challenges, maybe three. Just the sheer volume of data coming at us on any given day. It's like, different partners report on different cycles. Some are monthly, some are quarterly, and maybe they've got 60 files from their different territories around the world, consolidating that into a standardized format, transforming that data into a file that our system can ingest. Like when I started at CD Baby, they didn't have anyone full-time handling digital sales. It was so new that it was just kind of like Derek, our founder, was doing it. And then he's like, oh, you can do this. So it grew from me doing it to now I've got 3 people and that's their full-time job. And I could easily use a 4th, but it's just like transforming that data. And then the real pain point is metadata. And, I've listened to music biz panels about metadata and the importance of it. And, if something changes on a track, maybe one DSP updates it, maybe another one doesn't. And so then figuring out how to sync that report with what we've got as the source of truth, it's like someone actually has to go in and look and be like, okay, this track name, this artist name was on this UPC, and it's a lot of just like manual work. And there's things that our system can do. It's like where we can teach it what the right link is, but it takes human effort. And so my vision, my dream would be, we can just get the metadata right at first and have a source where we can all agree on, hey, this is what it is, and this is the source of truth, and we all look at it. It would make it so much easier. And then the third challenge is just paying people. Not every musician is, logging in every day and being like, oh, I moved, I changed my bank account, I did this, I did that. They're not thinking to update that necessarily. And so then we get into, territory depending on, if we haven't been able to pay them in 5-6 years, then we have to deal with escheatment and all that unclaimed property compliance. And it's a lot. So those are my big things, my big challenges.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like, we need to do we need to hire an ad agency and just do like a blanket marketing campaign that's like, tell your record label or your distributor when you change your email address.
Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like so much time could be saved if we could
like
just
that.
It's just the little details, and it's so important to get it right.
That one alone would be huge. That, and don't use the same password for everything. Could roll that into the communication. Everyone would be better.
Yeah, that's really true. And CD Baby, of course, is a really good example for us to talk to in this conversation, because you guys deal with, independent artists, probably artists that have label deals, maybe for some of their other music. But in general, you guys are dealing with, individual artists. And I think that's another aspect of this that's really important to understand, because it's just as important to pay one person who has one album up on your service as it is to pay a record label that has a catalog of 600 releases or whatever. It's just as important, and yet it's just equally as difficult, because all of the things that you just said make it really difficult. Yeah. There's another, and of course with independent artists, we're calling them independent artists, but really we should call them, artists without labels, artists who are releasing their own music. There are more and more of these people, like daily. Like, I don't even know, what do you know, like the number of people who put stuff up on CD Baby daily?
It's a lot. And with the pandemic, it's crazy. Like, wow. We're like, is this going to slow down, or is this just the new normal? But everyone's home and they're like, oh, I'm going to release that song I've been thinking about releasing. I mean, it's fantastic, but it's not slowing down, which hooray for job stability.
And it seems like it's going more global. That's what I keep hearing about. Like in Latin America and Southeast Asia, a lot of these indie artists are really growing and exploding.
And that makes it the challenge that much bigger, because
Right.
all of a sudden it's like, okay, we have to pay people, and we pay people if they've met their payment threshold. We pay them weekly. So, it's like we go through this exercise every single week.
Wow.
And people around the globe, it's like it's challenging, especially with the pandemic. In some places people still opt to receive paper checks, but the postal service isn't delivering to certain countries because borders are closed and things like
Yeah.
that.
And then even going into a bank with a paper check, like that's not the safest right now, right?
Yeah. So it's the global expansion. It's amazing that people around the world are finally able to get their music released, and there's all these new local DSPs popping up that are specific to different regions. Like, it's so exciting and such an awesome time to be in music. But when you think about the logistics of oh gosh, how do we pay them? How do we deal with all the compliance issues? How do we deal with the know your customer and making sure we're not tripping over, OFAC restrictions and things like that? It's intense.
It is really intense. So, Christina, do you want to tell us a little bit about how Payoneer has addressed some of these challenges?
Definitely. And Christine really hit on a lot of the areas where we focus, especially with, digital royalties. It can be complex. Like she mentioned, payments can be very small and they can be large and they can be very much global. And that's where Payoneer fits in. We really have the full global coverage, which I think is so important, especially as CD Baby grows and any digital music company grows. It's so nice to be able to rely on us because, you can pay all your artists, all your labels locally in local currency. And typically it's like within one business day, we have a pretty quick turnaround. Additionally, we have great KYC and compliance, which is just so important. I think when you're looking at all these mass registrations, these different artists coming through, you want to make sure you know who you're paying. And it's just so important to go through that vetting process. And that's what we support and work closely with you on. And then additionally, something that we didn't really mention is tax. So in 2017, a lot of the tax regulations in the US for the music industry changed and they're much stricter now. So we offer the W-8 and W-9 tax forms, and then also the 1099 and 1042 filings and the withholding reports, which has been very important for our music partnerships. And so I think with those things all aligned and just giving essentially at the end of the day artists options and how to get paid, it's so important to them. So beyond checks now, it can go straight to their bank, or if you want to use a prepaid card, maybe in an area of the world where there's not as many bank relationships, or maybe people just don't have bank accounts. It's just nice to have those different options and some flexibility.
For sure. And just speaking from the artist perspective, being able to receive payment in a culturally relevant method is so huge in terms of building trust and being like, is this a company I want to work with? And being able to log in and recognizing oh, this is a payment method I'm familiar with. That's really important.
Exactly. It just extends like CD Baby's relationship with the artist, and then they feel more of a local presence, and there's just not that disconnect, and it makes it convenient for them.
This question is for both of you ladies, because you might have more insight into it than I do. It's not just like we're getting data in massive quantities, which we are, but we're also getting it from different sources because there's so many services now. I feel like 25 years ago, there was really only one source, physical sales. But now we're looking at, dozens, if not hundreds of services that an artist might have their music up on. And so, is there uniformity to the way that information comes to you guys? I think you were touching on it with metadata, Christine, but my understanding is there's really not uniformity. So you also have to have a platform that figures out how to deal with different types of information.
Yeah, there's definitely no uniformity between, how Apple reports, how YouTube reports, how Spotify reports. It's like they all have some common themes, but they've all got their own special sauce for how they structure the files, what information is included at the line level, what information we have to calculate ourselves based on, the information in two or three other files. So like the amount of transformation that takes place, like if you had to see the sausage get made for some of these, you'd be like, oh. But we've got a team that, the good thing is once we figure out how to digest the information, it typically doesn't change that frequently, and so we can build utilities that make it a lot easier or smoother, so it's like it can be done programmatically. But yeah, there's no uniformity at all. And especially like as different platforms take off, it's like, oh, how is Facebook reporting? How is TikTok reporting? It's different than how, a Spotify or Deezer reports, because it's based off, it's a video use, and so they have a different perspective on assets than a straight, download or stream would be presented. So it's understand it whenever there's a new partner with a new file type, it's like a lot of time spent looking at it, analyzing, figuring out, okay, this is what this means, this is what this means, and figuring out the the relative terms, and kind of translating from like, okay, this is like the equivalent of what we see in a file from Amazon, and just getting common terms that we recognize and are comfortable with on our team, and figuring out how that fits in these new emerging fields.
Wow.
It's interesting.
Christina, what do you hear from your clients at Payoneer about, how working with you has helped them out? Because, I'm imagining from my perspective, like as a label, now that it's funny because like as I said, when I started 13 years ago, I was like, I can do royalties. Like I'm smart. It's fine. And now I'm like, oh my God, please God, can I find somebody to do my royalties?
And I think that's just it. I think it's offloading a lot of that effort and relying on a payment provider that you can trust, with the full compliance and the KYC that I mentioned. And then just like the reporting, the detail, we have a lot of different technology that you can use, like API, ISPN, webhooks, things like that, where you can actually pull back data and information into some of the formats Christine mentioned. And I think that's so important and convenient for you. So it's not just helping the artists, which is what we really want to do, and give them that localized approach and the currencies they want to see. But it's also giving you the ability to take that data and that information and easily implement it into your systems. So I know it's challenging to work, on the front end with the Facebooks and the Spotifys and everyone. But on the payment side, we want to make it easy and convenient for you. And you also want to know who you're paying. And I think the problem is sometimes you don't really know who you're paying. They're just inputting a bank account information or giving you an address to send a check. And by partnering with us, you can actually pull reports, see exactly who you're paying, where, how much. Maybe there's some cross-reference there. So really just using that data, evangelizing on it, and building a more streamlined business can help our partners at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. I wish I'd known you guys about 5 years ago.
Definitely. Well, now you do.
Yeah, that would have made my life a lot easier. So in terms of sort of like where we're going, what do you guys, I don't see I don't see the volume of data ever getting smaller.
No.
But ideally, in an ideal world, where do you guys feel like we're, what's coming down the pike? Christine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh gosh. Christina touched on it a bit with taxes. I'm sure, like, as we become just like a more global organization and everyone's connected. My voice is trying to leave me. All of the compliance efforts and tax reporting and KYC and all that stuff is just going to become even more important. As far as royalty reporting, gosh, it's a pipe dream, but I would love if there was a standard.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
bet.
even if it's, okay, an agreed upon X number of identifiers, if everyone always reported that, that would make things so much easier. But that requires a lot of big companies to probably make a lot of big changes in unison. And I know that
That's a
that
challenge.
can be wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. There was one thing I thought of talking about the importance of KYC and knowing who you're paying.
Right.
Probably equally important to know who you might not be paying. A thing that we see a lot, it's like fraudsters exist everywhere, and they're probably some of the most creative and persistent people in the world, and they're always coming up with new scams to run. And being able, like having a payments partner that can shut things down and actually give you feedback about like, oh, here's an account and it might be linked to these others. Like just having a relationship where you can share information back and forth, that is hugely valuable. And unlike some other friendly payment services with pay in their name, there's different approach to
Yeah.
fraud. So Payoneer's fraud team, I will give them a shout.
Yeah, Christine and I were just chatting about that earlier, actually, how we were helping with some fraudulent case. And I think that's our main goal, is just to create a true partnership and be an extension of your own teams and make payments easy, and whatever information that we can share to make that process more simple on your side. I think that's the end goal. And it's just working together at the end of the day. And that's the focus.
Well, I have to say, I think both of you are honestly doing the Lord's work, because I cannot believe the CD Baby pays weekly. That is, I can't even comprehend it. My mind is blown.
Honestly, that's one of my favorite things about it. When I started so many years ago, Derek was like, how do you describe yourself? I'm like, I'm fiercely independent. And like, having come from like major record label and publishing audits, I was like, it's just gross what some of these companies do to their so-called clients. I'm like, I don't want to be part of that. So being part of an organization that like takes so much pride in paying people, it's awesome.
That's amazing. Awesome. It's impressive.
That's awesome, you guys. Well, you're both awesome. And I think we've reached the end of our time here. We do not have any questions, but we could, if we have like 1 minute left, if someone wants to drop a question in the Q&A box. But if not, then yeah, I will just say thank you to both of you so much. And keep doing what you're doing. I feel like Christina, I should be like, get back to the salt mine right now. What are you wasting time with us?
Hard hat and catcher right behind me.
Get that metadata.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Ta-da.